Looking at the relationship of the comfort zone, how growth impacts comfort and creates discomfort, and maybe using the examples of recovery and loved ones not following their recovery. I got a lot coming up. So first, I want to lay a little bit of a foundation when it comes to a comfort zone. Oh, thanks, Steph. Hey, Charles. When it comes to a comfort zone, while we are in survival mode, meaning before we got into recovery, maybe even early recovery, until we felt embodied or identified and understood the term survival, because if you're like me, you may have been one of those people that said, I'm not codependent. I don't need to be here. I'm not in survival. Yeah, that's usually a telltale sign. Because our brain doesn't let us process any of that. Can't see the forest for the trees when I'm in survival mode. And the other thing that happens when I'm in survival mode is if there's a comfort zone, it's real little. And when it is real little, I want you to think of it kind of like the fuse on a firecracker. What we're working towards in recovery is making that fuse longer. When my fuse is longer, I'm usually not triggered as quick. Doesn't mean I won't be, because triggers are different, right? Some shit's bigger, so I should react different. But in thinking of from a recovery standpoint and what a comfort zone looks like, recovery is all about creating a comfort zone. Because I didn't have one. I, as an over functioner, was super high functioning, and on a scale of 1 to 10, I functioned between an 8 and a 10. Now that's not healthy, and that's not a bragging moment there. That's like, shit, that's where I was for decades and didn't know any different. So couldn't have addressed the lack of comfort because I functioned between an 8 and a 10. So moving down that number line, if you will, moving down to living in the gray area, that's where we start to develop a comfort zone. That's where I start to develop trust with myself so that when my body reacts, I respond. Because when I'm living in survival, all I do is react, right? Half the time, don't even know what the fuck I'm reacting to or why I'm being triggered, because my fuse is so short. It's just boom, 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 boom. Good or bad, not just stressful triggers, right? This can be excitement too. It doesn't have to be anxiety and anger. So in looking at a comfort zone and in looking at how do I build a wider comfort zone, because in my perception, that's what I'm doing in recovery, is trying to create this foundation so that I don't need to overfunction. And for me, and if you love the Amberism term of late stage recovery, sorry, I'll do that one again soon. It is that window of tolerance where I can overfunction or I can underfunction. And that late stage of recovery looks like I'm not doing a lot of shit I'm supposed to be doing. So in looking at it as a window going up and down, I want to find somewhere in the middle, and I want to build up some trust with myself. That's what creates that foundation of comfort. That comfort is about being safe. And if my fuse is real short, I may not make it into safety. If I do, I probably won't stay there very long. Now, when we think of it from that perspective, discomfort, it also has its own levels, right? I'm not saying it's all the same, but discomfort or triggers are going to impact me differently. There may be some things that I've been working on that don't pull me out of my comfort zone or out of my window of tolerance. That's the clinical term for it. but allow me to stay in my window of tolerance and use my tools. What determines that whether or not I can stay in and use my tools is the intensity of the discomfort. There's going to be some stuff that's just going to trigger the shit out of our body. And doesn't matter if we got 2 years or 20 years, hindsight's 2020. When I'm triggered and in it, I probably can't identify all of the triggers or the discomfort. But because recovery is a plane, I'm either doing pretty good or I'm not doing it. So being able to look at it from the lens of some of the work that I'm doing and the healing that I'm doing is widening that comfort zone or widening that window of tolerance, while at the same time recognizing, like, I ain't Wonder Woman. There's still going to be things that are going to trigger me that I have a short fuse on that, in fact, would trigger any human, not just me. So the idea of discomfort also could be on a continuum. And it's kind of like stress. If discomfort were stress, there's good stress and then there's bad stress, right? Bad stress also looks like high intensity or pattern over a long period of time. Good stress is I start a new job, I'm meeting new people. There is this onboarding period that's temporary and short term. It's not long term. So being able to look at how do I build this up more and more, and when I'm looking at the discomfort, sometimes I might need to be telling my body, no, it's okay. This isn't a bad one. Like, in other words, my body might be reacting as if it is a bad one. And I have the ability with those tools to really reframe that. That's CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, but to reframe that narrative. In other words, playing the tape through, looking at what's actually happening, and am I responding or am I reacting? What I want to make clear about that statement that I just made is, if I'm at that level of awareness, I'm all in my recovery. All in my recovery. Amberism. The gift of recovery is awareness. Recovery does not mean fucking rainbows and butterflies. Believe me, I wish it did. Thought that's what I was in for. I'm still waiting on them. Recovery doesn't mean everything's always good and I'm managing everything well. Recovery means I know when I'm doing good and I know when I'm not doing so good. Because if I'm at that level of awareness, or my word, embodiment, then I know what my body needs. If I'm not doing so good, I'm going to respond quicker and take care of my body. If I am doing good, I'm probably not going to get as triggered, but I'm still going to respond and recognize what I need. Now, let's throw in this topic of a loved one, because that's where I was going with the level of discomfort, especially when it comes to family of origin. And what I mean by that is generational trauma. Like, I'm not blaming husbands or siblings or parents. I'm not blaming anybody. But when it is family of origin, the reason that I'm pointing that out is the relationship with that trauma is a lot older. The relationship with that trauma is a lot fucking bigger. In fact, that's not just trauma, that's a wound. And a wound creates the pain known as trauma, right? So when we're thinking of what level of discomfort am I in when my loved one is not doing the things that they're supposed to be doing in treatment? And that could be any type of treatment, right? It might be addiction, it might be cancer treatment, it could be any type of treatment. And just because a provider tells people to do things, don't mean they're going to do it, right? They could be knuckleheads, they could be in denial, they could be practicing their freedom of choice and not want a certain level of treatment. What does that do to me and my body? Well, if that is a pattern and part of my wound from family of origin, that's going to be a pretty fucking uncomfortable. Like, that's not just discomfort at that point. If you're looking at it as stress or discomfort, consider putting it on a number line and giving it a number. Remember, if you haven't been in here when we've talked about number lines before, the way I teach them and what I offer, so if you don't have your own guidelines, use mine until you get yours. The way I teach number lines is anything over a 5 needs an action. If on a scale of 1 to 10, and it's stress or anxiety or anger, whatever, and it's above a 5, it needs an action step. In other words, you can't just sit there and do some deep breathing, right? So if it's above a 5, energy is feeling in motion. It needs something to do and some way to get out. Connecting with a safe person or a fellow traveler. Screaming at a pillow, primal screams. They're my favorite lately. Full moon, we just had too. Going for a walk. Doing an exercise dance. Those are actions. That's what I mean by if it's above a 5, there needs to be an action. Otherwise, you're going to feel like you're using a tool and it's not working. Well, it is working, but when it's above a 5 and your emotion is that intense, everything's energy. So you have to release it somehow. When I'm talking to a loved one, my mom, and a lot of her treatment right now is medical, and it also has to do with cognitive. And she says, I say, hey, Mom, how was your doctor's appointment? It was fine. Well, what I make up about that statement is she doesn't remember, which is a problem because it makes it hard for us to support the follow through with whatever a doctor recommends when part of the reason she's going is cognitive. Now, if you haven't been here before and you're curious about why I'm relating medical to things like addiction or mental health, it's because addiction is just one of the solutions for not feeling the wound. What we're fighting is trauma and the wound. This is not about blame and fault. It's just about fact. And whether I'm fighting my addiction of codependency or work, or whether I'm fighting my treatment of, I don't want to take any more fucking pills, Amber. There's not a lot I can do about that. And my trigger on a scale of 1 to 10, wanting to know what the recommendations were, I feel really powerless because nobody went to the doctor's office. We don't know what to do. We don't know what the recommendation was. And we don't even know when she needs to go back. So noticing what happens in your body and notice what you need by using the number line. Where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? Now, that doesn't mean that I can do anything about what my loved one is or isn't doing, right? I don't have any control over them. But I absolutely can recognize, for me, part of that wound that's happening, number one, is absolutely my need and want to control. My recovery program is ACA and control. I'm a recovering codependent. But number two, a wound that is also being triggered is not feeling seen and heard. I'm in this powerless state, and yeah. So I'm not feeling seen and heard because now I'm scared and I'm afraid, and it doesn't matter. So that is all mine. That's mine to do something with. That has nothing to do with my loved one. I mean, it has everything to do with my loved one, but she can't fix it. And there's nothing that she can say or do to make it better. It's all mine. So if I am on that discomfort or stress scale, and I am using my tools and I am above a 5, some of that we have to look at as grief. Some of that we have to look at as, in other words, it's not pathological. It is reality. And the grief is something, it's a process. It's not something to fix. So the recognition that what I appreciate about that is when I hear grief, what that tells me is, oh, this is a whole process. Like it's not a tool I'm triggered that I can do something about. This is a process.